Hello and welcome to today's video. In this investing arena that we all play in, there is nothing that ticks me off more, there's nothing that gets my blood boiling more than the rampant scammers who just take advantage of naive people who make it their life mission, it seems, to steal money from other people. And we're going to look today at some of the more popular scams. We're going to look at how our brains work and how we can be affected by scams. And we're going to look at ways that we can protect ourselves against scams. The worst thing to me is, yes, it sucks if you lose money to a scammer, but what really bothers me most, and this is something that I saw over all my years as an industry professional until I retired, is the hope that it takes away from people. It steals your dreams, it steals your hope, and it destroys faith in a system. And I saw many cases of people who were afraid to invest. And we know investing properly can provide so much opportunity, can provide so much stability in someone's life. And for these scumbags out there who steal that away from us, I wish there was more we could do, but let's do what we can to be aware and to take those tools away from them. In this video today, we're going to look at four major things. How do scams work in the first place? We're going to look at sort of the psychological tricks that these guys use to take advantage of us. We're going to look at some of the famous scams that have occurred over years. They're not new. We're going to look at the modern scams and how things have evolved and the tools that the scammers have available to take advantage of us today. And then, like I say, we're going to conclude with, what can we do? How do we protect ourselves against these scammers? And I'm going to start with a study in this video today, because I know some people right now are thinking, I'm too smart to get scammed. I'm too young to get scammed. These things are so obvious. And if that's the way you feel, I'm just going to ask, bear with me for, I'm going to say 4 minutes approximately to go through this next little, a recap of a study, because I think you're going to hear some things. And if you take them, if you have an open mind to these, you may be convinced that we all have to be on guard, not just the old and not just the uneducated. So the study I want to look at now is a 2013 study. It's called Scam Compliance and the Psychology of Persuasion. And they looked in their study at what makes people vulnerable and the psychology behind scams. It was a deep study, but a couple of the major factors that they took away that I wanted to share with you today are, the major factors are liking and similarity. That's one. And then social influence. And the world we live in today, these really are prominent. In their study, they had some comments. And one of the things that they identified, they said, individuals are more likely to respond favorably to others when they believe that those others like them have attitudes similar to their own. And how this relates to today is, in some cases, I see what I would call almost cultish-like followings or cult-like followings. And I think of some of the more current or more recent things like the Reddit streams and this love of Bitcoin, where people have just fallen in love with a group. I think of a company like Tesla. Now, don't get me wrong, Tesla is not a scam, but the people who get caught up in this cult-like atmosphere of a company like Tesla are susceptible to the scammers who will take advantage of that belonging, that feeling of belonging, and they will lead them astray and capitalize on that. That's one of the major things that today we have to be aware of. And as humans, we don't think about those things in the front of our mind, but trust me, the scammers really know that this is occurring. The second major factor I took away from this study is social influence. And we're just drowning in social influence today. People are susceptible to social influence. And in this study, they identified individuals in diverse cultures tend to construct their self-worth through comparison with others in their group. And they go on to say, if this extends to scams, it would lead to prospective marks or scammies who are more susceptible to social influence being more likely to comply with requests from scammers to their detriment. Now, today, how does that apply to us? Well, I think that there's this definite social influence that we have in general, but especially on the younger population. And something in the investing world that I see all the time is this differentiating between a younger investor and an older investor. And I get it. Millennials don't want to be boomers. I mean, they want to do everything the opposite of boomers. But when you look at investing, what do boomers tend to lead more towards, or the older or mature investor? You lean toward blue chip companies. You lean towards taking an acceptable amount of risk, but always having a core of the portfolio. On the other side of that, it's almost uncool if you're a millennial or a younger investor to invest in those old companies. The things like the Bitcoins are the thing of the day. I think back just very recently with these Reddit streams and all the fiasco we had with all the short squeezes. We had GameStop and AMC and all these companies that I believe people were taken advantage of. You had these relatively intelligent and well-organized Reddit, I would say, leaders who would buy into a company and then through the social influence and through social media would drive that price up. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this, a little bit in a few minutes in the video, but be aware of the fact that being in this group, you tend to follow when you shouldn't be following. So another key finding in this study I felt was they said younger individuals were more skeptical of scams, but at the same time, they were not less likely than older individuals to respond to fraudulent offers. Younger generations are more ICT or information and computer technology savvy and informed, but might not have had as much real world experience with scams as older individuals. The fact that the younger people are more savvy and go, for those reasons, I'm not going to click on the link I shouldn't be clicking on. The fact that they don't have as much world experience might factor into them making mistakes and slipping up. In fact, it does. The science proves that. Another key item in the study that came away is personal information. And in the study, they talked about personal information, saying that giving away personal information across all scenarios and losing money were closely correlated. Additionally, giving away personal information was a significant predictor in the models where losing money was the dependent variable of the regression. Now, we know that younger people are far more likely to just freely share their information than the older generation. And, I'm still of that generation where you protect financial information, health information, all these personal things. Whereas nowadays, it seems to be shared freely. Now, this study shows that if you do that, you are more susceptible to being taken advantage of. The study goes on to say, results of study 1 showed that a significant portion of respondents were reluctant to divulge personal information to scammers, but once they did, they were more likely to also lose funds to them. As far as authority is concerned, another key variable, the study says it is common for scammers to present themselves as reputable stockbrokers. It has long been recognized in marketing that authority figures play a significant role in purchasing decisions, hence the use of actors portraying doctors, lawyers, and scientists in advertising. There is an equivalent, I would say, in today's world with the so-called investment gurus of the internet. And I'm very skeptical of some of the claims I see online and in the YouTube videos where people have obtained tremendous success, and I question whether in fact that is true. I mean, logic tells me it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. The study says social influence was also a significant predictor of giving information to scammers. In study 2, allowing us to infer that individuals are susceptible to social trends and wish to conform with social norms. Individuals will comply with in-group requests even if those group requests go against their preferences. Now, in a case like this, I can't help but think of Reddit when I hear this conclusion and how people just seem to follow along without using any critical thinking, or even if they do have that critical thinking, they would rather follow along with the group and be part of that than not. Another identifier, I guess you would call it, is intelligence or education. And a lot of people think if you're smart, you can't get scammed. The study says a higher level of education also leads to overconfidence, which is a significant predictor of scam compliance. So if you look at this study, and if you think I'm too young, because only old people get scammed, if you think I'm too smart because only the uneducated get scammed, the data is there, and it shows you that, in fact, we are all susceptible to it. So in this video, we're going to carry on now with identifying a little bit of history of scams and how we can protect ourselves. There are a ton of scams out there. It's almost dismaying when you start looking at the ways that people have devised to rip us off. I would say the 3 sort of most relevant that we're dealing with today are phishing scams, which we're probably all familiar with, pump and dump, which has been around forever, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. And then, of course, the endless scams on the YouTube channels or the YouTube comments. Let's look a little bit about the history of scams. Now, scams aren't new. They've been around. And in fact, they date back to around 300 BC, if you can imagine that. I'm going to share with you 3 historic scams today, and then take the techniques that were used and apply them to sort of relate them to modern day. The first one I'm going to look at is what's known as the Spanish prisoner scam, and otherwise known as the advanced fee scam. So this dates back to the 16th century, and in this story, a scammer would tell the victim that he's a wealthy person imprisoned in Spain, and this poor prisoner can't reveal his identity, and he's relying on a friend to raise money to get him out of jail. Now, he offers the target, in this case, to be part of a big reward if they put some money up front and help secure his release. And in this particular scam, to make things more interesting and enticing, he actually promises the hand of his daughter, who's this supposedly beautiful woman. Now, of course, if the people get sucked into this scam and they start sending the person money, once they send the first batch of money, further difficulties are announced, and then this continues either until the target runs out of money, or either they clue in or they just finally give up. Now, how does that relate to today? We're all familiar with the Nigerian scam. And this is basically where you get these silly emails. They seem silly, where there's some person over in Nigeria, he's a royalty or he's a a wealthy businessman who has millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that he needs to get out of the country, and he's enlisting your help to move those over here. And of course, they establish a trust relationship, and they offer to reward you mightily if you help them do this. But then, of course, it goes into, well, in order to set this up, you need to give us some banking information. We'll transfer some money into your account. And of course, this all goes to stealing money from you, identity theft, that type of thing. And they look ridiculous. I'm sure most of you have received them and you laugh and get a good chuckle. They do fool people. If they didn't fool people, and they've been fooling people for hundreds of years, apparently. If they didn't, they wouldn't keep doing them. One of the most fascinating examples of how this has worked is a fellow by the name of John Worley. Now, he is a 57-year-old. He's a Vietnam vet. He's an ordained minister, and he is a psychotherapist. Even though he had all this world experience, he educated, he fell for a scam. In fact, he actually went over to the dark side and started to, he got greedy and became involved in this. There is, I'm not going to get into the details of this, but I'm going to include a link below this video. And if you look at a New Yorker article that was written, it's called The Perfect Mark. And it goes and shows how even an educated person can be sucked into a scam like this. It's quite a fascinating read. The second example of scams that we're going to look at today is called the Right Panic. And this dates back about 120 years to the year 1900. And this is a lesson in the power of social pressure. In this case, there's a financier named Whitaker Wright, and he had a number of companies, none of them very good, but his strategy was to put big names, like prestigious names, mostly royalty, on his board of directors. Investing with him became very trendy, not because he had good companies, but just because of the names. Now, reality was that his companies weren't sound, and when the truth finally came out, the shares collapsed. How does this relate to today? Well, when I see the world out there today with the influencers online who people will blindly follow, when I see the SPACs, and we have people like celebrities, we have people like Shaquille O'Neal and I guess for the older crowd, you may not be familiar with Paul Ryan. He's the former Republican Speaker of the House. Alex Rodriguez, A-Rod. These people all are associated with SPACs, and people will invest with them because of the name. Now, people got sucked in 120 years ago by doing this, and there's nothing to say that that's not going to happen again. In fact, I would expect that it will happen again. The last historic scam that I'm going to speak with you today is about a company called Brex. And this goes back to about 1995 to 1997, in that range when I was in the business. And I remember this vividly. The story of Brex is that it was a a gold mining company, and they had an Indonesian gold property. And in October of 1995, they had declared that they had discovered this amazing amount of gold, and it was the richest gold mine ever. The stock price went from 30 cents to $286 by May of 1996. In fact, in 1996, late in December of 1996, Lehman Brothers, which was around at the time, put a strong buy order on shares of Goldcorp. In March 1997, the veil was sort of pulled back from the company, and they were exposed the fact that they had been salting their gold samples. And so in reality, the mine had little to no gold in it at all. And predictably, the shares just collapsed. They went back down to the pennies. One of the fascinating stories of this whole drama, and if you were an investor, then you'll remember this, was the geologist named Michael de Guzman, who right at the end, right when the shares were collapsing, he mysteriously fell out of a helicopter in the jungle. And I think to this day, whether he committed suicide, whether he was pushed out, I don't think the answer will ever be known. But that was a real big dramatic part of that story. The lesson for today is that even smart people can lose money. With the Bre-X scandal, the Quebec public sector pension plan lost $70 million in this scam. The Ontario Teachers Pension Plan Board lost $100 million in this Bre-X scam. Now, I'm assuming that those people had very competent, very educated, at least, people managing those money, and yet they got caught up in the crowd. They got caught up in the scam and lost $100 million or more. And you look back and you just think, gee, we're just sort of almost like sitting ducks here because we don't have all the resources they have. They fell victim to that. Let's look at some of the modern day scams. And the big ones right now are, well, I mentioned them earlier, but let's start with spear phishing. We all know what spear phishing is. And this is when you get typically an email or a text nowadays. And they basically imitate or impersonate a credible company. So I got a couple this morning, and you seem to get them all the time. They'll come from I got a FedEx announcement saying that your parcel has been delayed, and click here to find out when your delivery will be coming. We got them from banks. We've got them from utility companies just saying, there's an issue and we need you to log on to your account, enter here and put your password in, and we'll fix this for you. Well, they're fake, and they've come a long way from the early days of phishing, and they can really look like a credible, legitimate site. What they're doing, they just want you to click and give them the information, and they're going to use that either to scam you out of money or for identity theft. There's a number of different things that they do with those. The bottom line is they just want to gain control, and they do that through tricking your mind into thinking that this is a legitimate link you're going to click on when in fact it isn't. The second scam I want to look at today, relevant to all of us here in Canada, is the CRA scam. And probably you've received a call from a number, and they claim that they are calling from the CRA or an authority, and they're saying in this phone call that you owe tax money, it's overdue. And in many cases, they tell you that if you don't pay money right now, they will send the authorities. They'll send the police to arrest you. And while I was working as an investment advisor, I actually did receive phone calls from some of my senior clients who were rattled because they had been told that they needed to send money or they would be arrested. And it's a shock to your system. And if you don't have the ability or the wherewithal necessarily to go on and do your homework on that, you could fall victim. In fact, people do fall victim again, because if they didn't, they wouldn't keep doing these. It's insidious, but they're out there. The third scam I want to talk about today is an old one, but it's still live and well. It's pump and dump. Now, traditionally, a pump and dump operation, where we call them boiler room operations, where you sat with a phone book back in the day, and you called people, and you named a company that either didn't exist or was a shell company, and you talked about the virtues of it and how you exaggerated the operation, the risks, the opportunities that you would get by using either false or misleading information. Today, this operation is live and well on the internet. Just think of the company's GameStop. Just a couple of months ago, they were being pumped up, and even today, I'm seeing it all the time. Bitcoin being pumped up, even though the fact that it's pulled back significantly of late. But the people who already own it, not everybody, of course, but the scammers, the manipulators who already own it, their whole goal is to own it, drive that price up by giving misleading information, giving false information, and then once it's gone up in price, they're going to cash out. And who's along for the ride? Well, all the naive people. And I'm getting back to kind of where I started, where these are people who know what they're doing and they're capitalizing and taking advantage of the naivety of the new people into the markets who are ultimately the ones who are going to get hurt. The last scam I want to talk about today I just call it YouTube scams. Now, this is in the comments section where you're going to get a ton of comments linking you to, professional guidance, directing you to a WhatsApp number or an email. You're asked to send money and, typically they promise very high returns. And although I've never actually followed through and contacted any of these numbers as part of my due diligence, but I do know that when you contact a WhatsApp number, they're going to either impersonate and say that they are the creator of that channel or often impersonate it, or they're just going to say, I'm Mr. Robertson and I'm an investment advisor. Send me your money and I'll give you these great returns. This is very much, I think, like the Spanish or the Nigerian scams, where they're promising you something and you pay for that expertise. Now, of course, once you've paid, though, they're going to disappear and you'll never hear from them again. What should you watch for, or how do you protect yourself against these? Well, number one, most importantly, we need to understand how our brains work against us in a time like this. And this is where the scammers understand how our brains are wired and they capitalize on that. The things like the social influence, the need to belong, the need to be part of a community, they will prey on that. To protect yourself, when you get a link, when you're tempted, regardless of the form of delivery, when you're tempted to do something and there's just something about it that just seems wrong, give yourself an opportunity to think. There's nothing that's going to require you to click on that link or send an email right now. Step back, take some time, assess the legitimacy of that. So, like I said earlier, these people can be really, really tricky, really, really, convincing. So be careful and just use your critical thinking, use your common sense, and create that gap of time from when you actually see something to when you act on it or hopefully don't act on it. With the CRA scam, that's simple. CRA isn't going to call you and tell you that they're sending the police over to arrest you if you don't pay. Share this with your friends. Share this with your family if there's anybody that you think might be vulnerable, because it works, sadly. But if someone is really wondering, then hang up. Obviously, you don't have to be polite. You don't have to entertain the call. Hang up. Call the CRA if you actually feel that maybe there's some legitimacy to it, and find out that way rather than just being reactive. Be proactive. The obvious ones: never click on a password, or never click on a link rather, to send a password or to provide credit card information. These are things that our human nature just wants to do. Get it out of the way, capitalize on it, but just don't do it. You've heard it a million times, and yet today people will do it again. Just don't be one of those people. Have you ever been scammed? Have you ever sort of fallen victim to one of these con men? Do you know of someone who's been scammed? Most people today, because of the widespread use of these, most people are familiar with somebody who has fallen victim to this. If you do, and if you feel comfortable, share your story in the comments below and just help the community. And there's some things that are pretty obvious, but there's always new ways that are coming up. And if you have something to share with us all, then that would be very much appreciated. As always, if we do have the Investing Academy, and I'm thinking of some of the psychology that goes behind the scams, and psychology is also a huge part of being a successful investor. And that's one of the topics that we do cover in our Investing Academy material. And if it's something that you are interested in or would like to learn more about, the first link below this video will be for that. I'm going to wrap up this video, and I thank you for watching. And if you're one of those earlier, I don't need to know this, but heck, I'll indulge the guy and watch it. If you did learn anything new from this video, appreciate it. Just drop a comment on that. If you liked the video, if you felt there's value, please just give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. We do videos like this all the time, and we try and bring you value, education, and some form of entertainment as well. So I really appreciate you watching. I will just wrap it up, and I'll just say thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.